How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Greetings, conversationalists. It's Eric Erickson here across America, from Alaska to Palm Beach and all points in between. 877-973-7425. We're still trying to get on in Hawaii so I can make a tax-deductible business trip to that station. Just saying. Keep me in your prayers, people. All right. We got to talk about a story in the New York Times from their editorial board, no less. Don't flip the switch and say, I'm not listening to the New York Times, because you actually do need to listen to this. And this is a series of stories that the New York Times has done that's quite alarming, and it's very well documented. And even Donald Trump knows there's a problem and has cited the New York Times. So when the president himself is citing the New York Times, you should pay attention to it. I'm just going to read to you the opening. It's very graphic intensive. I got to scroll. This is important. In 2020, the Navy had a simple plan to build its next fleet of small warships, the Constellation class. Take a European design and build it in America. But the Navy's constant changes complicated the project. The shipbuilders and supply chain couldn't keep up. They wanted to modify the radar and onboard system, swap in American cannons, remove a sonar dome for stability. They wanted to increase the weight. They wanted to change it to a more powerful hybrid engine system. They wanted to upgrade to quieter and more reliable propellers. They wanted to lengthen the hull 24 feet for a larger engine. By 2025, the Navy had overhauled 85% of the original design, and it still wasn't final. On November 25th, the military canceled the Constellation project. It cost $3.5 billion, and it produced 0 ships. America can't make what the military needs. The Constellation is just the latest in a string of American shipbuilding failures. Over the past 35 years, the Navy has commissioned more than a half dozen new kinds of ships, from small combat vessels to large destroyers. Nearly all of them have flopped, running billions of dollars over budget and years behind schedule, and failing to perform as promised, leaving the military reliant on a fleet designed largely in the Reagan era. Recent efforts to build fighters and bomber aircraft have similarly disappointed. It takes on average 12 years to produce a war-ready jet, ship, or tank, and the Air Force is retiring planes faster than it can replace them. America's defense industry, like so much of the economy, has lost its ability to build quickly and efficiently. This has left the United States at risk of falling behind China, which has embarked on one of the biggest peacetime military expansions in history. Beijing now operates the world's largest naval force with over 370 ships compared to America's 296. It has several types of ship-killing hypersonic missiles, while the United States has deployed none. Most of all, China is making all of this at speed. It currently produces more than 3 warships for every one the United States makes, and nearly 200 commercial ships for every single American boat. Rebuilding America's defense industrial base is crucial to preventing war from starting and winning them if they do. If the United States can't make what it needs to prevail in a long war, one lasting months or years, its adversaries are more likely to attack. As the military maxim goes, industrial might is deterrence. America needs to reinvest in building military hardware. The United States spends about 3.4% of its gross domestic product on defense, down from 5% in 2010 and 9.4% in 1967. 0.5% more, or around $150 billion spent on manufacturing capacity, would represent a major effort to rebuild our industrial base. More importantly, though, is whom the Defense Department is buying weapons from. The defense industry has consolidated from 51 major players in the early 1990s to 5 today. Lockheed Martin, RTX, which is formerly Raytheon, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, and Boeing. Partly as a result, the U.S. domestic supply chain has withered as smaller machine shops that make key components for ships, submarines, and aircrafts have gone out of business. Those 5 contractors, known as the primes, have built their business around government contracts. They have become masters of the bureaucracy, but are incapable of churning out weapons quickly, a fundamental requirement of modern warfare. As we've seen in Ukraine, the mass production of off-the-shelf drones has countered high-priced weapons like tanks and helicopters. Ukraine immobilized Russia's formidable Black Sea fleet, in part with remote-controlled speedboats laden with explosives. Larger firms must adapt to the speed of modern conflict, while smaller firms need a chance to get in the game. The government should place bets on innovative startups rather than defaulting to the slow, costly primes. Mr. Trump is pushing a Golden Fleet initiative to develop new classes of Navy ships, along with an armada of unmanned vessels. In an attempt to imitate Ukraine's success, the Navy's 2026 budget calls for spending aggressively on unmanned systems, including billions of dollars for air, surface, and underwater drones. How the Navy plans to achieve any of this in the wake of one failure after another is anyone's guess. So far, the government's efforts to diversify and innovate have mostly shown how bad things have gotten and how far we still have to go. America had more than 300 commercial shipyards in 1980 and produced dozens of ships each year. That production depended on federal subsidies, allowing the industry to compete with shipyards in countries with lower manufacturing costs. President Reagan, trying to shrink government, canceled the subsidies in the early 80s, and American shipbuilding lost many of their private sector customers. Tens of thousands of workers lost their jobs as foreign competitors picked up the business. American shipbuilding collapsed. 40 years later, the Constellation project ran into that reality. Initially, the Navy's approach seemed smart. Rather than building a new ship from scratch, it'd use a proven design for a frigate already in service with the French and Italian navies. To build it, the Pentagon chose Marinette Marine, a Wisconsin-based shipyard owned by the Italian company Fincantieri. What began as a quick and low-risk way to get what the Navy needed soon turned into another sad example of American industrial dysfunction. The Pentagon ordered new weapons and equipment for the ship, including a different electric propulsion motor, propeller, and diesel generator. The ever-growing list of changes required workforce and supply chain flexibility. A shortage of machinists, welders, pipe fitters, electricians, and other skilled tradesmen needed to make the parts and adjust the ship's ever-changing design meant added costs and delays. With no end in sight, the Navy canceled the project in November. It says it will buy the 2 ships that are in the initial phase of being built if they're ever finished. Delivery remains at least 3 years away. A week after the Navy's announcement, Marinette Marine laid off 93 workers. First of all, I don't know if you noticed this. The New York Times editorial board is actually embracing the concept of peace through strength. They actually are. They wanted to use the industrial term about industrial might leads to peace, but it's peace through strength. When you have the New York Times recognizing we need a bigger military because something wicked this way come, you should be paying attention. When the libs at the New York Times recognize we need it, we probably need it. They want to throw Ronald Reagan under the bus, but part of what Ronald Reagan was dealing with was a bunch of same reasons, sclerotic, small-time weapons builders who were relying on government subsidy, who themselves were becoming inefficient. And so essentially we were relying on a free market to build efficiencies, and we got those efficiencies. But what happened over time is the consolidation into 5 major weapons manufacturers existing on government subsidy. Government subsidy leads to inefficiency. And by the way, I would be remiss if I did not point this out. Healthcare is the same way. Healthcare is the same way. You got a handful of insurance companies, and you got the government in the mix subsidizing everything. It leads to inefficient healthcare. We're seeing the same problem. It's a different industry, and it purports to be different, and on the surface it is, but it's also because of the massive government subsidy and involvement. That's part of the problem. That's part of the problem. So you see these different setups, and the reality is that you have a situation where our weapons industry has become highly inefficient. With 5 companies, you got Anduril. I am fascinated by this company. If I got it, I'm on a website where I could potentially invest in it, but I don't have the money to invest in it. But I would be interested to invest. Anduril is making drones. They're headquartered in Atlanta, and a buddy of mine is in the weapons industry, we will say, and he is fascinated by this problem as well, and he recognizes the inefficiencies. Now, I would say what my buddy would tell me, and I'm talking about you, man. What he would tell me, he's going to listen to the podcast later and text me. What he would tell me is that some of this isn't right. That the public sector does believe that there are weapons systems the United States doesn't have that it needs that the United States has and just isn't saying anything about. But it is true that, remember, one of the deals we were cutting with Ukraine was we wanted to learn more about manufacturing drones from them. They've had to, by necessity, learn how to make a lot of drones quickly, and their drones are very good at what they do, and we need a lot of drones. That's what Anduril does. They're making all of these awesome low-cost drones. They've even got some that can take off. This is the coolest thing ever. I've seen this video demo. So they've got rockets that can launch, and if the target is destroyed before the rocket gets to them, the rocket turns around, goes home, and lands, and you can refuel it and use it later, which is an incredible deal. I'm fascinated by Anduril. I'm fascinated by this company. There are some great innovative companies out there in the weapons industry. We need more. We need more innovation. The problem is that you need deep pockets. And part of the problem, too, is that in the tech sector, people are so hostile to the United States, even inside American companies. Look at when the workers at Google found out Google was working with the Pentagon, how they reacted. Amazon and the like, using Amazon Web Services for some of the military and some of the for ICE, and you had employees melting down about it, thinking that they were better and greater, that their progressive values getting in the way of being patriots for the United States. There are real problems, but also the Pentagon actually needs to deal with this issue. Now, of course, I would note that there is a lot of antagonism towards Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth. But also, there's a recognition that they may be able to be the ones to break through. Let me read you these 2 paragraphs. The 2,000 pages of regulations for companies seeking federal contracts favor the primes with their army of lawyers and former government weapons buyers. Companies built to compete in America's dynamic commercial markets don't have the time or resources to master the Byzantine art of government acquisitions. The Pentagon should relax its rules for buying weapons to clear the way for younger companies to seize the opportunities to compete. The Trump administration deserves credit for several moves addressing the defense industry shortcomings. Mr. Trump has announced large investments in shipbuilding and drone manufacturing, and in November, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, ordered a sweeping review of how and from whom the Pentagon will buy its weapons. Either you, our companies, our industries, our defense industrial base deliver, or we fail, Mr. Hegseth told weapons manufacturers on November 7th. It is literally life or death, Hegseth said. The administration's messaging is on target, but it's an open question as to whether it can follow through and earn congressional sign-off on the initiatives. Even if the moves are successful, the United States will need to collaborate with other countries to keep pace with China. The largest of Beijing state-owned shipbuilders delivered more than 250 ships last year. Collectively, they can carry more than all the ships the United States shipbuilders have built since the end of World War II, according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies. That the New York Times is raising the red flag and sounding the siren is something we should all pay attention to. The bureaucracy ultimately stifles innovation and competition, and we are now a nation, a global power, that can't even build a ship for the Navy or a bomber for the Air Force. And that's a terrible place to be in, as China is hungry for our territory and control of parts of the world. Greetings. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson. Just had this exchange. Make sure I got the audio routed here right. Peter Doocy and Carolyn Levitt at the White House over what's happening in Venezuela. This press briefing
right now. Is Operation Southern Spear about drugs or is it about oil?
What I will tell you, Peter, is that the Trump administration is focused on doing many things in the Western Hemisphere. The president has taken a new approach that has not been taken by any administration for quite some time to actually focus on what's going on in our own backyard. And there are two things that are very important to this administration. Number one, stopping the flow of illegal drugs into the United States of America, which we know has killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. The president promised on the campaign trail that he would demolish the foreign terrorist organizations and drug cartels around the world, especially right here in our own hemisphere, and you have seen that he is delivering on that promise. With respect to the oil and what happened yesterday, the Department of Justice requested and was approved for a warrant to seize a vessel because it's a sanctioned shadow vessel known for carrying black market sanctioned oil to the IRGC, which you know is a sanctioned entity. So the president is committed to stopping the illegal flow of drugs into our country. He's also fully committed to effectuating this administration's sanction policy, and that's what you saw and the world saw take place yesterday.
There you have it. Carolyn Levitt answering questions about this tanker that has been seized by the Trump administration off the coast of Venezuela. We know it has been selling oil on the black market for some time, that the Biden administration had sanctions on it but refused to act on those sanctions, and this president is willing to act on the sanctions and stop it from happening. Good for him for doing that. Now, when we come back, I will take more of your phone calls, 877-973-7425. Got a lot more to go as well, including the Democrats ready to shut down the government again. I've got those details for you. First, let me tell you about the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. You can get 3 of them for less than $200. You save $200. You go to EdenPureDeals.com. You put in the discount code ERIC3, ERICK, the number 3, no space. It's an air purifier, so it gets rid of pollen, dust, pet dander. It generates plasma and inside it, and so as it pulls air in, that plasma kills 99% of bacteria and viruses, and then it also produces ozone that drifts out into the air and eliminates the odors. And I actually don't use it as an air purifier. I use it as an odor eliminator. So it's very small. You can hold it in your hand. You can plug it up with a USB cord. You can plug it into the wall. So I've used it in rental cars where someone had smoked in the rental car to wipe out that odor. I've used it in hotel rooms where the hotel room smelled musty or had someone had smoked in it or was smoky next door, wiped out those odors. I've used it on my back porch when I got my smoker on the back porch, drifted into the screened-in, glassed-in area. Used it to wipe out those odors. When I'm in the kitchen making gumbo and get a little smoky, I use it to wipe out those odors, and they just work. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is ERIC3. You'll get 3 of them for less than $200. Greetings, conversationalists. It is Eric Erickson here. Thank you to the fine hosts at WOKV down here in Jacksonville, Florida. I will be traveling tomorrow, which is why we're taking phone calls. I'll be on air tomorrow. I just know that I've already been advised that I've got a gear to be able to take the phone calls and stuff. Not going to work tomorrow. So if you want to call in today, but I will be live with you tomorrow, coast to coast. The phone number today, 877-973-7425. I'm going to take Nancy's phone call right now. Welcome to the show, Nancy. Thanks for calling in.
Thanks for letting me get through. So long-time listener, first time getting through. I want to add to your previous caller's conversation, I think his name was Neil, about people being dumb or stupid about tariffs. And then a little bit about myself. So I'm a registered nurse with a business degree, and I educate patients. And I educate patients on a very complex disease state and a drug that treats that disease state. But when it comes to economics, I am not well educated, so I consider myself the least common denominator. And I think the problem that President Trump has, I had to turn him off last night. I got so tired of listening to him talk about how wonderful things are, but we're not educating to the least common denominator out there in the community, and nor do you, Eric. Every time I listen to you, when you talk about solutions to the Republican Party, you're talking about the tariffs and you don't agree with them. I'd encourage you to think more about talking to the person that is a very well-educated person, like I consider myself, but I know very little about economics. So I would be that least common denominator. And I always appreciate your history lessons, but help me understand what Mr. Trump thinks he's going to accomplish in 2 years. And I would be willing, and I think more people would be willing, to continue to support him for that period of time.
Well, so I get your point. I would say you should probably listen more, because I do get into those issues, but I also am of the position that I don't think the tariffs are going to help in 2 years. So I don't want to tell people things I don't believe are true. And I don't believe the tariffs are going to help. In fact, I think the tariffs actually continue to make things worse. And so I don't want to try to explain the president's policies when I think they're bad policies. I can explain his thinking, but I think he's wrong. And so I don't want to be a cheerleader for what I know to be not a good policy, and that what conservatives have historically rejected. And I just, for example, think it's funny that if you go to the Heritage Foundation website right now, where they've changed to become very populist, and you search for stories on tariffs, they have sent down the memory hole decades worth of research on how bad tariffs are. You can still find them there. They haven't deleted them. It's just harder to find them. My concern with tariffs are this, and I'll do this very simply. Again, for the lowest common denominator out there. A tariff is a tax under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 of the Constitution. Now, we call it a tariff and not a tax because a tariff is what's considered actually a duty. Now, what is a duty? D-U-T-Y, not what my kid did as a toddler in a diaper. What is a duty? A tariff and a duty, they're basically the same thing. So a tax is a tax that is individually obligated to a person, and a duty or a tariff is a tax that is individually obligated to a good. So you owe taxes, and it doesn't matter who you are, you owe a tax. And you can't transfer that liability to someone else. You owe your income tax. You can't say, well, Jacob is going to pay my income tax. No, Jacob may give you the money, but it's your tax burden. A duty or a tariff, same thing. A tariff just relates to something being imported into a country. That's the specific denominator. A tariff is applied to a good. It doesn't matter who pay. Unlike your tax, it matters that it is your tax. With a duty, it doesn't matter who pays it. It's got to be paid by somebody. And who pays tariffs? The people importing them into the country. So what happened is a lot of companies where the president says other countries are paying the tariff, that's not true. It never has been true. It never will be true. What is happening is companies in those countries are lowering their prices so much so that when you add the tariff, it is equal to the existing price before the tariff. That can only go on so long because it starts to eat into their profits. It starts to eat into their ability to make money. What is happening to the bulk of the products, 70% of the goods coming into this country, the tariff is paid by an American company or by you. You rarely pay 100% of the tariff. The reason is companies pay part of it, and then they raise the price a little bit, and you pay the rest of it. It eats into their profit. Now, what happens when it eats into their profit? A tariff reduces a company's ability to pay higher wages, to hire people, and to invest in the company. Why? Because they're having to pay a tax on a good they've brought into the country to resell. Small businesses, a lot of the knick-knack shops that around Christmas time have all sorts of Christmas decorations you can buy and stuff, they're the ones who are the hardest hit by the tariff because they can't jack up the price 100%, 50%, 25% and pass it on to you. You're simply not going to buy it. It puts them at a competitive disadvantage to a Walmart that has billions and billions and billions of dollars as opposed to the small business that has hundreds of thousands or $1 million. So small businesses get disproportionately impacted by tariffs than big businesses. They can't pass all the cost on to you, and it matters greatly to the survivability of that business. Now, what happens? What happens is where we are right now, and we are seeing in the economy, and if you will recall, I told you in March, April, and May that this was going to happen. No prophet is welcome in his hometown. Some of you still refuse to believe it. You're just having to ignore every bit of economic data out there to say it's not happening. What is happening? Layoffs are increasing now. For people who aren't being laid off, they're not getting pay raises. Companies are not hiring, and they're not investing in growth. They're cutting back on advertising. They're cutting back on investment in business. They're cutting back on other things. Why? Because they're having to now pay a tax on a good. They're paying a tariff, and that's limiting their ability to make profits because they don't want to pass 100% of the cost on to you because they know you can't buy the good, so they're cutting into their profits. They're reducing the profits the company makes. And what does a company do with profits? It increases wages, it increases hiring, it increases investment, it increases shareholder payout. I haven't even talked about shareholder payout. Shareholder payout means that if you're invested in a 401k and business is impacted by tariffs, your stock's not going to grow as much. So it affects your retirement plan because these companies are impacted by tariffs. So the president says the tariffs are going to do good. I don't believe it because of all the things I've just said. And because I don't believe it because of basic economics. And again, I'm not an expert, but I know the basics of economics. I have taken economics in college and even in business law and in law school I had to take economics classes. But I also know the experts who see this real world impact. Even Ronald Reagan, when he imposed tariffs on a limited function with Japanese because of microchips in the 1980s, said bad policy, sometimes necessary, but bad. Global tariffs are a bad policy, and that's what we're doing right now. I don't oppose tariffs on China. I think we should have tariffs on China. If a company or if a country is dumping a product in this country, tariffs. But global tariffs are a bad policy because it drives up your costs and it causes businesses to not be able to invest in the future, invest in wage growth, invest in hiring, and often causes layoffs. And right now, inflation is over 3%. And because of the tariffs, remember, wages had crept up above the rate of inflation when Donald Trump became president. And after the tariffs were imposed, now inflation has crept up above wages. So every month now, the $1 in your paycheck buys you less than it did when Donald Trump became president because of the tariffs, directly related to the tariffs. And everyone knows it and everyone says it. And on social media and among the president's supporters, everyone yells at you and tries to drown out the truth. All I'm trying to do is tell you the truth. Don't hate me for telling the truth. If the president insists it's a really good policy, he needs to make a better case. And my suggestion to him is just get rid of them until after the midterms, and then you can bring them back. But you're just driving up costs right now. James, I want to go to you next. Welcome to the show.
I appreciate you taking my call, and I also appreciate what you're saying about tariffs. I wholeheartedly agree. If we did away with those, at least to some extent, it would certainly help those of us who are paying for all of this stuff. My question is this. With Marjorie Greene resigning, if she does in fact resign, if it takes effect the 5th, in an election year, and if Governor Kemp declares a special election, would a candidate then have to both qualify twice and run effectively 2 campaigns?
Okay, so great question, James. Yeah, he's probably going to have to call a special election. I forget what the law is in Georgia, but I think there's so much distance between January 6th and the general election in November. He will. And then, yes, you will win a special election and immediately begin campaigning for the November election as well.
Well, the qualification date is February time frame for the November election, yes?
Yeah. Yep. So what they would have to do is I mean, and again, don't hold me to this one, James. It's been a long time since I practiced election law in the state of Georgia. They may have changed it, but I think the law in Georgia is that if a congressional seat is going to be empty for X number of days, you have to have a special election. And so I think they're going to have a special election. So they'll have to do a week of qualifying for the special election and have it, and then that qualifying can happen right after January 6th when the seat is vacant, and then do it all over again in February.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's exactly my question. My point, if you have to qualify for November by February and the first special election date is March 16th, well, the qualification for November has passed if you qualify for the special. So I guess that's going to require a candidate like me I haven't decided yet. There's so many moving parts, but I would have to pay 2 qualification fees and run 2 campaigns, I guess. Yeah,
you would. The whole thing is just, she really honestly should have served out her term. She should have. She was obligated. Now, I say this as someone who left a city council spot 6 months early because I got a new job and I couldn't stay in my elected position and do the job, so I left. But hers is a different situation, that she's not going to anything. She just doesn't want to keep doing the job. But yeah, I do think there's going to have to be a special election in that district because of the gap between January 6th and January of the next year. It's essentially a year of vacancy for that congressional district. So I think that's going to have to happen. And yeah, that's also, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but she hung out with the Code Pink leader yesterday, singing each other's praises. The Code Pink leader has deep ties to communist China, and it's kind of wild for Marjorie Taylor Greene to keep calling herself America First and calling the president a traitor, and yet she's the one hanging out with the leader of Code Pink, who has deep ties to communist China. It's just kind of wild to see. By the way, speaking of the Democrats, Nate Silver has a piece. The headline, "The Democratic Base Isn't in the Mood to Compromise." Texas has been a tease for Democrats, despite being a diverse, urban, multicultural state. The last time it elected a Democrat as governor was Ann Richards in 1990, and the last Democratic U.S. senator elected in Texas was in 1988 when Lloyd Bentsen won another term while simultaneously losing as Michael Dukakis' running mate. Beto O'Rourke came close to victory in 2018, finishing within 3 points of Ted Cruz, but since then, Texas has slid backwards for Democrats. Joe Biden lost the state by just under 6 points in 2020, a year when pre-election polling had suggested a close contest. Donald Trump blew out Kamala Harris by 14 points in the Lone Star State last year. As in Florida, Democrats have discovered that electoral improvement in the suburbs doesn't outweigh the combination of a shift among Latino voters back toward Trump, plus a solid base of Southern religious conservatives. Still, if you had to design a Democratic candidate in a lab to break through the red wall in Texas, someone like Colin Allred might come pretty close to the idea in a football-obsessed state. A civil rights attorney and former linebacker for the NFL's Tennessee Titans. Sure, the Cowboys or Texans would have been better. Allred has a strong electoral track record. In 2018, he upset Republican incumbent Pete Sessions in Texas's 32nd congressional district by an impressive 6.6-point margin in a district that Democrats hadn't even bothered to contest 2 years earlier. Indeed, in 2024, Democrats gave Allred a try as their U.S. Senate nominee. He performed considerably better than Harris, losing to Cruz by 8 points. It was a loss, but election nerds like me are inclined to point out that this was actually a pretty good performance. Last year obviously wasn't a great electoral climate for Democrats, but outperforming Harris's baseline by 6 points might be enough in a blue wave year. A distinct possibility next year, given Trump's unpopularity and what is likely to be a substantial Democratic turnout advantage, as demonstrated by an excellent set of results for Democrats in off-year elections last month. On Monday, however, Allred quit the Senate race to run for the House. He attributed his decision to wanting to avoid a bruising primary. The primary is likely to be contentious anyway because of State Representatives James Tallarico and Jasmine Crockett, who opted on the Senate race after long deliberations. The polling is messy, and Texas's use of a runoff system adds to complications. Allred trailed Crockett and Tallarico, so Allred's leaving the race for the same reason most candidates quit. He was probably going to lose. Now, here's the problem. Crockett won't be a strong general election candidate, but she might actually put up enough of a fight. Tallarico might be more the man for the moment. A devout Christian. He's not really, but a former public school teacher who went on Joe Rogan. He reads as a moderate. In practice, his issues are uniformly progressive. Tallarico, if you go there, says it's time to start flipping tables. Flipping tables is a biblical reference. Allred wants to go after corrupt politicians like Donald Trump, and Crockett, of course, has taken on this tone. All the Democrats want fighters. They want fight. And in Texas, I don't know that they're going to be able to put up a fight for the Republicans. They're so divided internally. I assume you've heard of Kenyon Dobie. He was stabbed by an illegal alien on a Charlotte train. The illegal alien was harassing people on the train, and Kenyon Dobie tried to stop the illegal alien, who had a knife and stabbed Dobie, who has been in the hospital. Well, Dobie has now been charged with punching a pregnant woman in the face so hard he fractured her face and threatened to murder all of her children. Not all the people you think are heroes turn out to be. Yikes. Now, let me tell you about Americans for Prosperity. They would love to have you involved in their organization. They have chapters in all 50 states. They engage in advancing common sense conservative reforms. What you do is go to americansforprosperity.org or go to afpvolunteer.com. If you go to afpvolunteer.com, you can sign up to be a volunteer in the fight for freedom. They will keep you informed. You can get the information. Be hyper-informed about public policy in your community. They'll also teach you how to make a case before your local government, state government, or federal government on policy issues you care about, or just to persuade your neighbor. They'll teach you how to get people out to vote on Election Day, to mobilize an army of activists to win the election. Go to afpvolunteer.com today. Sign up with Americans for Prosperity. I'm on their board of advisors. I go around the country speaking for them, working with them. They're a great group. We'd love to have you. afpvolunteer.com is the website. afpvolunteer.com.